Good afternoon, everybody, our guests, our viewers. My name is Lidia Kokavcová. I'm working as a consultant at the Human Rights Institute here in Slovakia. Today, I will be hosting this already a fourth event in project called Strengthening Bilateral Relation Between Reform and Human Rights Institute. The project is supported by Norwegian grants and the Slovak government. And just a small disclaimer, everything published during this session reflects the opinion of the speakers and Human Rights Institute exclusively. Neither the Norwegian funds nor the Slovak government is responsible for the content of the project. But still, we are very grateful for the support. And now it is my pleasure to welcome here Kelly Fisher, who will be our speaker today. And our topic today is very, very interesting, especially for Slovakia. It's gender segregated labor market. So, Kelly, we are looking forward to see your presentation.
Great. Yes, thank you so much for that introduction, Lydia. And I'll just go ahead and share my screen here. And I believe everyone can now see the PowerPoint, correct? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, super. Yes. So my name is Kelly. I'm an advisor at the Reform Resource Center for Men. And today I'm going to be talking a bit about working against a gender-divided labor market or a gender-segregated labor market, but with a specific focus on how do we recruit more men to what are professions that are typically more female-dominated. And before I kind of get more into this presentation, I actually want to share a bit how I'm personally engaged with this topic, a bit of a personal experience I had with this. And to tell that, I actually want to travel a bit back in time. I'm originally from the US. And here I found this very stereotypical image of an American high school, which is where I want to begin this story. This is not my high school. This is just a random one that I found on Google Images. But I was very excited to start high school for lots of different reasons. One of them was that I was excited to maybe go out for some of the different sports teams that were available at my high school. I was also really looking forward to the new classes that were going to be available. I myself had always been really into jazz, and there was a jazz band class that was offered at my new high school, so I was very excited about this. But the thing that I was actually looking forward to most, or one of the things I was looking forward to most in high school, was actually high school dances. Prom, homecoming, all these kind of very stereotypical things I've seen in the movies. I thought high school dances, these look super fun. I can't wait to try and ask someone to the school dance, go to prom with them. This is one of the things that I was really excited about, which I know sounds pretty ridiculous, but I think that reflects where my head was when I was a 14-year-old. But I was a bit nervous because I wasn't sure how I was going to find a date to go with me to the high school dance. But luckily, when I was there about a week after I'd started and people were registering for classes, I noticed that it was possible to sign up for gym class, but you could also sign up for dance class. And it was possible to get credits for gym by taking dance class. And what I noticed was that there was like 40 girls signing up for dance and 40 boys signing up for gym class. And I thought, this is how I'm going to find a date to the school dance. I'm going to sign up for dance class, which maybe is not the greatest motivation. But when I walked into dance class on that first day, I had this image that I was going to look something like this incredibly graceful ballerina. This is how I kind of envisioned myself. And while this is not what I turned into, I did not turn into this amazing graceful ballerina. I did realize very quickly that I actually really loved dance class. I really enjoyed kind of the creative elements of it. I was someone who was really into music. I'd liked sports. And I kind of felt dance class brought all these different things together, which I quite enjoyed. And a few months after I'd started dance class, we had our first big dance show coming up. And I was very nervous, very excited. It was going to be in front of the whole high school, which was about 1,700 people. So it's a lot of people. And the show went really well. And I was so happy with myself. I'd never done anything like that. I'd never really performed or done anything like that. And I remember very clearly when I went to class the next day, thinking, oh, what did my classmates think about this? And I remember when I walked into my first class, someone called from the back of the room, "Oh, look, there's that loser Kelly who was in the dance show last night." And someone said, "Oh, you looked really good in those tights last night, Kelly." And then lots of other comments kind of came in, quite a few homophobic slurs. I'm not going to say them now. I'm sure you can figure it out. And I was pretty crushed, to be totally honest, because I found out that I really liked dance, and I kind of thought, well, okay, I think I'm just going to quit. There's no point in continuing with this. This has been a really brutal day, honestly. And I went home and I kind of started talking with my father a bit about it, and he'd kind of see that I was really bummed, and he kind of made the point that it doesn't really matter what people think you should or shouldn't do. Often the people who say that you can't do this or you can't do this or try and put you in a box are the types of people you don't really want to listen to. And I took his advice, and I kept dancing throughout the rest of high school. And when I went to university, I actually took some elective dance classes, and still to this day, I really enjoy dancing. But it's really easy to think about how this story could have looked very different, where maybe I didn't have a dad who thought, oh, you know what, like, who cares? And I quit dancing and I never really went further with it. And I highlight this because it's just one very concrete example of many ways in which boys and girls and lots of different people face different stereotypes about this is something that girls can do but boys can't do, or this is something that's more masculine but doesn't really make sense for girls to do. And this is a much broader dynamic that we see quite reflected also in terms of what types of jobs people think about going into. And this is just kind of a side note to it, but I think it's kind of interesting because I later went on to do my bachelor's to be a teacher. That was what I took my bachelor's education in, which is a quite female-dominated profession. And I didn't really think much about it. And I later went on to do my master's in gender studies, which is, again, a very female-dominated study. I think I was the only guy in my program. And I think that this experience with dance and kind of learning or kind of becoming more comfortable with that played kind of a role in me not really caring as much and being bothered by that, where that isn't always the case with everybody. But we kind of see this broader dynamic of what is something that's seen as something that maybe is more typical for boys to go into, or something that's more typical for girls to go into, is quite reflected also in our labor market. And here I'm just going to give an example of what do you see of some breakdowns in the Norwegian labor market. This is unfortunately, it's in Norwegian. But you can see that the blue represents jobs that men are overrepresented in. The orange represents jobs that women are overrepresented in. And the ones I've highlighted in red are jobs that are quite heavily female dominated. But for example, so for the first one, ladet, it means teacher, where we see around 70% of all teachers in Norway are women. With nursing, which is the one underneath it, sykepleier, it's 90% are women. Grunnskole-ladet, which is an elementary school teacher, 75% women, and then barnehage-ladet, which is like a daycare teacher, is 90% women. And for some of the other ones, like an engineer, for example, is quite male-dominated, 80%, 20% women. Some other ones, IT consultant, 80% men, 20% women. But we're going to be mainly focusing here today on professions in which men are underrepresented in part because this is something that we see in Norway, but also research. There's been a lot more focus and a lot more efforts and campaigns and research on how do you recruit and draw more women into male-dominated professions, which is a really important topic. But there's been a lot less focus on how do you draw men into female-dominated professions. And this is a topic that we work a lot with reform, and one that's going to become more and more relevant and important as we see kind of these gender divisions even growing a bit more. And I'm going to kind of come back to this a bit, but all of these professions, teachers in particular, play an incredibly important role, as we know, in students' lives. And it's really important then that, as we know, representation matters. Students feel like they are reflected in the teachers they have. And when I think about myself, my elementary school, from the age of 6 until the age of 12, all my teachers were women. I never had a male teacher. And that's quite common, actually, for a lot of students. And that's only kind of growing. And for some students, for me, that was quite fine. But for other students, that can have an impact, in particular for maybe single mothers, where maybe a boy doesn't have a male role model in the home, and then they don't have any male teachers who might be role models for them. That research shows can have some consequences later on. And then I also did some looking this up a little bit, what this looks like in Slovakia. I saw it's also quite gender divided, that around 90% or 97% of nurses are women and 98% of daycare teachers are women in Slovakia. So it's similar, we see similar trends there also. And we might wonder, why is it so segregated? And there's lots of different reasons that you can kind of point out and think about. One of them, which is kind of obvious, we can think about, is obviously there's a historical fact that plays a role in this, and also in regards to how did our labor market look very different just 50, 60 years ago, where it was quite typical that women didn't work and it was only men working. So that plays a very big role in this, obviously, in terms of why it's such a segregated labor market. And what's quite interesting to also think about is that professions that have always been, even when it wasn't common for women to work, that have been typically more feminine jobs, such as nursing and education, these have been professions that women have always worked in often, which we kind of still see today, reflects that. But this can also change over time. Such, for example, accountants. This has been a job that historically was quite male-dominated, that recently has become quite female-dominated. Other professions, such as the food industry, like being a cook, used to be quite female-dominated, and now it's actually quite male-dominated. So we can also we can see how these professions can change, and what can kind of be seen as a feminine workplace or as a masculine workplace, or a feminine job or a masculine job isn't concrete, it changes. And obviously gender norms play a factor in this, and it starts from a very young age, socialization in childhood, lots of different factors, from what types of toys people are given. You know, for example, that maybe a boy is more likely to be given a Lego set, and they're more likely to build with it, and they might get more curious and interested in building stuff and go on to a career in engineering. And maybe someone might say to their daughter, like, oh, you're so good at playing with your doll, you're so good at kind of taking care of that person, maybe you want to be a nurse. Like, there's lots of different ways in which we're so officer toy, it's usually a male police officer. If you buy the nurse toy, it's more often a female. So we see these types of things that are reinforcing it. We see it in television. It's a lot more likely that if you see a nurse on TV, it's maybe a woman. Also, when we go to school, we see a lot more female teachers. So lots of different factors. And it's also important to highlight how those around us play a role in it too. So maybe your parents, what type of profession they go into, what your friends' parents go into, what your friends want to do. You know, if I think about myself as a guy and I wanted to be a nurse, and all my friends were going into something very different, then maybe I feel slightly less likely to want to be a nurse. So those around us also play a role. And another reason why we see such a segregated labor market is that it can be quite difficult being one of the minority in your program. And this is the case with, for example, male nurses in Norway. I'm going to kind of come back to this point in a little bit, but that there's much fewer male nurses than there are female nurses. And when you look at students studying to be nurses in Norway, male students are much more likely to drop out than female students. They're overrepresented in dropouts. And there's some different reasons for that, but one of them has to do with that when you talk to them, they say, I found it really hard to kind of feel a sense of belonging. I was one of the only guys, and I found that quite difficult to navigate, actually. And you see that also reflected with women who go into quite male-dominated professions. You know, my female friends who went into engineering talk about how it can be really isolating to be the only woman in a lecture room of 100 people. So that is also playing a role in maybe why someone changes study choices or what they want to work with. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what this looks like within Norway in terms of national efforts to work against the gender-segregated, gender-divided labor market. And I'm going to talk a bit about how Reform has been working with this topic. And I would say that within Norway, this is quite a hot topic, a gender-divided labor market. It's gotten a lot of national focus, both from high-up political leaders. And here I've put up two different documents. They're both in Norwegian, but kind of reflecting what kind of the national efforts that are going into this right now. The first one on the far right is a white paper of sorts, and it's called girls' rooms, boys' rooms, and rooms for possibility. And that was a very important white paper that kind of outlined what are all the different factors we see and different challenges that we see for gender equality, both in terms of what boys are experiencing and girls. And of course, I know I've been saying lots of boys and girls and men and women, but also acknowledging that not everyone fits into that binary. What are the challenges that non-binary and trans individuals also experience? And then the document on the left is the strategy for a more equal and labor market for 2021 to 2024. So this is an explicit document that lots of different ministries throughout the Norwegian government are all working on to try and secure a more equal education and labor market. And some of these points here now I have on the left are kind of drawn from some of these different documents, just so you know. So one of the national efforts has been giving study points. And so the idea behind this is that if you are a woman who's applying for certain programs that are quite male-dominated, such as engineering or computer science, you might get some extra points added to your application so that you become slightly more competitive. So this is kind of a way to try and help girls get into quite male-dominated programs. This has been a strategy that's been used for a while. And historically, it's been to try and help women get to balance out the university representation between men and women. And there's 6 programs where that is for men. I think it's really important to highlight here that today you actually see, which is quite common in a lot of countries, both in Europe and also in the United States and Canada, that higher education is quite female dominated. In Norway, that 60% of all university students are women. And that's quite similar to some other countries that you see. Also, obviously, it varies, but you see a broader trend in which more and more girls are becoming the majority in universities. And of course, it's important to say that this has not always been the case. It's balancing out what has been decades and decades and hundreds of years of the opposite. But what I think is interesting is that we see that this is becoming it's growing as a gap. And today there's only 6 programs for men where they can get study points in Norway, where there's 38 programs for women. And those 6 programs for men are nursing, psychology, like social and child welfare services, veterinary programs. But you see there's quite a big gap between how many there are for women and how many there are for men. And when we already kind of see that the labor market, or that the higher education is skewing more and more female, that you would think that at some point they would maybe realter this, which there are some discussions around. There's a national campaign launched in 2022 specifically to recruit more men to female-dominated professions. This includes lots of different efforts. One of them is called the Role Model Program, where, for example, a male nurse might go in and talk to a high school or a middle school about why he decided to be a nurse or why he decided to be a teacher. So there's a specific effort right now to try and make it more aware of men who go into female-dominated professions. There's also a website and a national-wide effort called Men in Health, which is a partnership between the Ministry of Health, local governments, national governments, the social welfare offices that kind of help. And they are working very actively to recruit more men to nursing or to work in the health fields. And so there's lots of campaigns, there's lots of information there for I'm interested in maybe going back to school and becoming a nurse, these types of things. Another one is an initiative that's targeting career counselors. And I'm going to come back to that. It's a project that Reform is a part of, which is called More Diversity, More Freedom to Choose. And the last point, gender quotas. This is quite a hot debate right now in Norway. It's ongoing. There was recently a white paper that one of their suggestions was that to try and balance out what you see the growing gender division of more and more women going for higher education than men, that there should be a quota put in place that in certain programs, such as, for example, psychology or medicine, 30% of all students in the program should be men. And so, or the opposite for a different program. So this is something that's kind of being discussed right now as a possibility. Of course, those students would have to have good enough character or marks, grades to get in, but that this is a possible debate right now. So there hasn't been a decision about that. This is being debated right now amongst the Norwegian politicians about possibly implementing gender quotas in higher education. So reform, this has been a topic that we've been working with for a very long time. Ula, who gave the presentation last week, I believe, or the last presentation, he himself wrote his master's thesis about men who worked as daycare teachers back in the late 90s. And he has been working with reform since basically the mid-2000s. So this has been a topic that has been kind of on reform's agenda for a very long time. And here are just 4 specific projects I'll point out. I'm going to go more into 2 of them. So one of them, Men in Nursing Education. This was a partnership project between Denmark, Iceland, and Norway, where we did lots of interviews about male nurses, with male nurses and male nursing students about their experiences of being male nurses, what they felt like could have maybe done better to make them feel more welcome, or experiences where they felt maybe unwelcome, or types of discrimination or stereotypes that they experienced, and in general, why they also wanted to go into nursing. And this is a great report. You can Google Men in Nursing Education, and you'll find this whole report, and it's got lots of great policy recommendations. So I just highlight that there. And the other project just underneath it is a Norwegian project, but it was guidelines for recruiting men to be daycare teachers. So it was a pamphlet targeted towards daycare leaders or people who worked at daycares for how they could more actively recruit men to work in their daycares. And then these other 2 projects on the right, Share the Care and More Diversity, More Freedom to Choose, I'm going to talk a little bit more about here. So the first one, the Share the Care project. So this is another project that's about recruiting more men to nursing, and it's actually a follow-up project from the Men in Nursing Education project, the one I just mentioned, where based upon a lot of the findings that we had in that project about ways in which male nurses felt like there could have been more done to make them feel welcome, we kind of created 8 activities around that. And so one of them is a follow-up system. So having a better follow-up with the male nursing students throughout the semester to kind of see if they're already starting to struggle a bit, how can they get better support or have their needs better met so that they don't drop out, since they are overrepresented in dropouts. And I should say really quick, this is also, again, a Nordic cooperation project. So we work on this project with partners in Finland, Sweden, and Iceland. And we are working specifically with one university in Norway, kind of as a pilot, and then we hope to build out some of these efforts nationwide. One thing that we found in the earlier project, Men in Nursing Education, is that both the curriculum, like the textbooks that students had, the websites, the social media, it basically only showed women. And the textbooks would often say, she is going to help him. Like there was lots of gender stereotypes about like it's always a female nurse. So we worked with textbook publishers. We brought that to their attention to have more gender neutral language, and also to scrutinize what material the universities have on their websites, to not only have pictures of female nursing students, but also have male nursing students. Because if you're a guy and you're thinking about, do I want to be a nurse? And they go to the website and you see only women, maybe you feel slightly less likely to apply, which is something that we heard in our other project. Another activity is improving the male students' learning environment. So we've helped to establish a mentoring program where older male nursing students mentor younger male nursing students, and some other activities such as that. We've given talks on the first day of the semester. And this project specifically, we're going to be writing a handbook, which we're going to be finishing this project in 2024 this year. And we're writing a handbook so that with kind of some of our advice for how universities can better recruit men to nursing, and then some of our advice about what are the practical things you can do in the study environment to create maybe a better environment for male nursing students. So I highlight that for anyone who might find that interesting. This next project, More Diversity, More Freedom to Choose. This was a Norwegian project, so those Scrabble letters, that's just it translated. And this was a project where it was a cooperation between Reform and several other NGOs in Norway, where we facilitated workshops with students who had chosen non-traditional lines of study for their gender, about how they'd kind of found their interest, why they wanted to go into that study program, their experiences in it, how they felt like maybe experiences where they felt kind of isolated, and how they felt that teachers and career counselors and different people in the school could help create a better environment or recruit more students there. And kind of based on that, we then arranged workshops and activities targeted towards career counselors and teachers and other people in the schools about how they can, one, create a better environment in their schools so that students maybe feel less restricted by gender norms in terms of what profession they can choose, but also to talk with the career counselors about how maybe their own internal biases that they don't necessarily think about played a role in what they might tell a student would be a good study fit. So for example, they might be more likely to say to a female student, I think you'd be a really great nurse, but maybe a lot less likely to say that to a male student. These types of things. And then from that, there was developed a digital course that's targeted towards students that teachers can use, where students in different levels, it's kind of targeted towards what's kind of like the middle school, the school before high school in Norway. So students who are ages like 12, 13, and 14, or 13, 14, and 15, where they think about how gender might play a role in what types of careers they want to go into. So that's a tool that came out of that. So I'm just kind of wrapping up here. And I think it's really important to kind of come back to this question of why does this matter? And as I kind of pointed out earlier, we have a lot more research and a lot more work that's kind of focused on how do we recruit more women to male-dominated workplaces. And most of this research, most of the findings from this shows that workplaces thrive much better when they have a diverse workforce. More diverse perspectives means that when, depending on what type of task you're working with, you have a more diverse view of how do we make sure that this activity maybe fits for all of these students' needs, or how does this best fit these users' needs. Having a diverse workforce helps to make sure that you are developing activities and projects that work well for all those who might encounter them. But I think what's specifically important to highlight about the professions that we see that are female-dominated, in which we're trying to recruit more men into, these are types of professions that can play very important roles, such as male role models for lots of young boys. And especially right now, we see that, I'm speaking now from Norway, and I'm not entirely sure what this looks like in Slovakia, but boys are really struggling in the education system. In Norway, they're much more likely to drop out. They're much more likely to have poorer grades. And there's lots of factors that go into it, but a part of it, they think, is that there's not a lot of male role models for them, and they feel maybe not as represented by that, and that having more male teachers could play a role in kind of helping these students feel a bit more seen in the classroom. But also other professions other than education, but nursing and psychology is also a profession that you see becoming quite female-dominated. There are some men, if they want to talk to a psychologist about different mental health challenges they're having, they would prefer to talk to a male psychologist about it. And if it's primarily women, then it can be really hard for these men to have a chance to talk with someone. And we see that at Reform. We actually have a therapist who works with us, and he specializes in working with men. And a lot of the people who come and talk to us, they say, I really appreciate, I've talked to several different therapists. They've all been women. I feel like they haven't understood where I'm coming from. And the same can go with nursing also, that some men might prefer a male nurse to help them maybe with something that they feel kind of vulnerable about. And last is that these professions, education, in the health sector, they're some of the fastest growing jobs. They're some of the jobs that are unlikely to really be impacted as much, you could say, by technology, artificial intelligence. These are jobs that are people-oriented, and we need people in them, and they're growing quite quickly. And in the case of Norway, nursing is like one of the most in-demand jobs. It's a huge shortage. And if you're only really getting one gender to apply for that job, you're much less likely to fill the demand. So it's also quite smart in terms of thinking about why are we only trying to recruit women to be nurses when we could also be trying to recruit men, and then we'll actually maybe be able to meet the demands we have. So that's also a good argument, you could say. But I think that kind of brings me about to time. So I hope this was interesting. I hope that it made sense what I was saying. I'm looking forward to kind of the discussion from here now. That's my email if anyone wants to hear more about this or interested. But yes, really looking forward to the discussion now. So thank you.
So thank you, Kelly. It was very interesting, and I have My first question I have written down, and you've mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, the historical reasons why there is a, let's say, gap on the labor market between men and women. But this is what occupies my mind already for longer time, because women have the same possibilities to have education, to be educated in the same way than men, or like men are. It means that that it's that there are not the women are not excluded from the educational point of view from the male professions. But what is the specific reason if the women are choosing the female jobs or men are choosing the male jobs? Because in the past it was clear, it was like male, female, and it was very clear. But now with the education was a game changer, or everybody thought it will be the game changer.
Yes. So kind of, if I understand your question, kind of like why is it so, like, even now that there's equal opportunities, why is it still
Exactly.
so divided?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I think that's a great question. And I think there's lots of factors that go into it. And I'm not sure if you've kind of heard this there. Norway got a lot of focus, I would say more some years ago, kind of it was called like the gender equality paradox, because Norway is often kind of seen as one of the most gender equal countries in the world.
Yes.
And it has some of the largest divisions in the labor market. And that's quite interesting to think about. And I think there's some different factors, and that gap has actually kind of narrowed more recently. Like this was more of a gap almost like 10 years ago, and it's kind of narrowed a bit. So I think, like I said, there's lots of different factors that go into it. And I think for whatever, like, I think it's very important to kind of both see this in terms of social and nature versus nurture, right? I think this is kind of relevant to think about here, where for whatever different reasons, some girls might feel more called to go into, there's kind of this debate that guys are more into things and girls are more into people. This is kind of, I don't know if you've heard this stereotype a bit, or this discussion a bit before. And so if you do look at some studies that kind of show that girls do overall have more interest in, you could say, more people-oriented professions, and men have more interest in, you could say, more thing-oriented professions, engineering, carpentry, and everything. So I think what's interesting there is that there's this one study that's quite interesting. I'm forgetting who did it, but the gap between what people go into is bigger than people's interest. Like, for example, in terms of like, there are lots of, if you talk to more boys, they say, oh, I'm interested in working with people, blah, 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 but then it's 99% of daycare teachers are women, so there's something kind of both in Slovakia, that is, or it's 90% in Norway. So there's lots of other factors that are kind of going into that, where I do think there is something about when people see kind of like the gender makeup of a profession, or like what they see, I think there is some different social factors that are kind of going into it, where they see, you go to the hospital and you look around and you see that it's all female nurses, and then you don't feel as much like, I'm a guy, do I see myself as a nurse? So I feel like that's kind of a long answer. I don't really give you a concrete answer about this. I think there's lots of factors that go into it. And I think that kind of going into it, that it's unrealistic to say that we're going to have 50-50, it's going to be 50% male nurses, 50% female nurses. And I don't think that necessarily is the goal. I think the goal is that it should just be closer to the point where, maybe 70-30 is more realistic, but it should be that it shouldn't be impossible to find a male nurse, or, yeah. If that answers the question a bit.
Sometimes in Slovakia, it isn't, let's say, we have something like an excuse okay, but women have to go to maternity leave, and they choose this kind of profession, let's say teacher, because in the morning they are working, in the afternoon not that long, and they can be with the children, or let's say they intend to spend more time with the family than men. But I still cannot answer properly if there's just an excuse or if it's like reality. Is it you think, is it connected also with the factor of women preparing for maternity and so on, for raising up the children?
No, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think so Norway has a very strong welfare model, as we know. It has lots of long paternity leave and flexibility and stuff. But I think that there are some professions, like I actually just recently became a dad 2 or 3 months ago. And I think a lot about how I have a quite flexible job right now, in terms of I can come into the office at 10:30 if I need to, because my child was up all night and my partner needs to sleep a few extra hours in the morning or something, But if I was a nurse, that wouldn't be possible, right? I think nursing is a job that requires you to be in a place for a certain time, from a certain time, and that's, I wouldn't say, particularly great in terms of with all the things that you have to throw around with in terms of coordinating around a child. So I think there's probably some aspects to that where maybe maybe that plays a role in why women don't work as often on offshore oil platforms, where it wouldn't be possible for them to leave their child for 3 months or something. It was a newborn baby or something, if they were trying to breastfeed. So I think there's some aspects to that, but I think some of the jobs that are quite, not speaking in the Norwegian context, such as nursing, it's not a very flexible job. You have to be there. You might have to work overnight. You might have these longer shifts, and that can be quite difficult if you are a new parent. So,
it is interesting how everything is changing in comparison with the past, because in the previous century, at the beginning, the teachers in Slovakia were just male. This is probably everywhere or throughout Europe. It was like man was a teacher. And then, as if it would lose the attractiveness, or I don't know, whatever. I don't know what happened, because the man was the one who was in a village or in a small town. He was teaching the children. And now, from your statistics, I have seen almost all teachers' profession are occupied by most women. What, for example, for me as a feminist, I'm happy with it that women are raising up the children and they're educating them. But of course, it's not right. It's not equal. It's not proper.
Yeah, and I think it's that's I made this point a bit earlier, but there's some very interesting research in the US about, in particular, boys kind of a more vulnerable background. So they have lower socioeconomic status, they're ethnic and racial minorities in the US. You could say more vulnerable demographics. And that research looks at for this kind of more vulnerable population who don't have a father in the household. One of the biggest factors that plays a role in whether or not they go on to succeed, to finish high school and everything, depends on if they had male teachers. And obviously that's not the one golden arrow that fixes everything, but it shows that kind of having these different male role models can be really important. In particular, I would say for maybe more vulnerable student groups that or student populations that maybe don't have as many male role models around them or anything. So, yeah. So.
And in Slovak schools, it's very often okay, there are many female teachers, and there are also some male teachers. Definitely, the director of the school is male. Even there are just not some male teachers, but the director is even more gap. I mean, this is like not just the basic gap, but there's like one position more, one grade higher.
So kind of I think that's also similar in Norway also, that like the schools are quite female dominated, but then in the more higher up administrative positions might be more likely men. But I think that's also, I don't know 100% what that is right now in Norway. I know from the US, just because that's where I grew up. I know that's the case definitely in the US. So yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what the gender breakdown is of more higher up administrative positions in the Norwegian school system. But I can imagine it's also probably, even, you know, when the whole education system is a lot more women, it's more closer to 50-50, if not slightly more men in leadership positions, I would kind of guess. But I think I think what's kind of interesting to think about that is that there's a lot of kind of discussion also around, I'm not sure what this maybe looks like in Slovakia, but in Norway, that the school system has now become, it is better structured around girls' learning styles than boys' learning styles. That has been kind of a discussion and a debate a bit in Norway. I know something that's kind of interesting is that research shows that you know, boys and girls' brains, they both develop, you know, quite similarly, but that there are slight gaps in terms of the girl's brain developing just slightly faster than the boy's brain. One gap is around the age of like 5 or 6, and another gap is around like 13, 14. And these are two quite important years in the education system. In terms of like 5 or 6 might be when you first start primary school, elementary school, in which the girls' brains might have actually developed slightly more. There's this one, maybe you're familiar with him. His name is Richard Reeves. He wrote a quite good book called Of Boys and Men. And he writes a bit about this and kind of what the research shows and what are some of the consequences of that in the education system. So I think that's kind of one interesting thing to think about, that, for example, in Norway, there's a discussion about possibly holding all that boys can be held back a year. All boys shall start school at the age of 6 instead of the age of 5, for example. That's kind of a discussion right now in terms of would this maybe help, because especially boys who are born in November or December, you know, if that's like the cutoff for the academic, or like for what year you go into school, it's based on the calendar year. And if you're a boy who's born in November or December and you're kind of born towards the later end of that year, these boys are quite overrepresented in those who really struggle in the education system. And it's not quite as much of an impact for girls who are born around that time. I think it kind of shows that 5 or 6-year-olds, kind of that gap between male and female brain development. So that's kind of interesting to think about. Yeah.
You've mentioned the national campaign launched in 2022, if I remember well. Do you have any data? Was it successful, or is it successful? How is it being done, and how are there any outcomes?
It's a good question. I think because right now it's still it's for 2021 to 2024. So I'm sure that afterwards there will be some reevaluations of it. So I don't know entirely what are the like concrete outcomes, you could say, from that national strategy quite yet. But that's something I can kind of poke around for, or if I find something, then I can send along. So.
Yeah, I was just asking if there are already any outcomes. You know, because we in Slovakia, we have, because I have checked it before this discussion, we are on 24th place within the European Union on the Gender Equality Index. So I mean, this is really sad. It's like 12.6 points below EU average, because below EU score. So we have these huge problems concerning female male labor market and so on, and we also still don't have this kind of activities you've mentioned in the presentation. But is the situation, is the situation, let's say, in Norway better in the private sphere, or I mean?
So the kind of like the private sector is definitely more male dominated. That's and especially in terms of like leadership, and that's included in the strategy document, the one that we talked about. Some of the areas in which they've highlighted that they are working in terms of where women are specifically struggling in the labor market has to do a bit with like leadership in companies and in the private sector, where, for example, finance is more, finance is male dominated. What I think is kind of interesting and that's very important, as we know, finance plays a very important role in our society. But what's interesting there is that there's a lot more, again, efforts, I would say, in terms of or that's been kind of more longer going, of recruiting more women into these sectors, or, for example, women in finance. Like you find more like mentorship programs. The Norwegian bank, they started a program called Women Invest, and it's a program that's targeted towards women, trying to kind of improve their financial literacy and more kind of improve their investment skills and everything. And so I would say there's much more awareness and kind of effort that go towards that, and it's quite important. But I see that you kind of miss this same energy with, I guess now I've talked a bit about some of these campaigns that are more recent for getting more men in the health sector. These are really important, but they're kind of more recent. And this is kind of based on my own observation a bit. But I feel like there's much more solidarity, I think, amongst women supporting other women in more male-dominated fields. They're much more likely to start mentoring networks, and lots of energy and stuff put into that. I have female friends who are in the finance sector who go to these like monthly meetups and stuff. And we tried to we had a lot of effort, it was quite difficult to start a mentoring male nursing program at the university. I really felt like there wasn't that same energy of like male students being like, we're going to support male students. And I think that was quite kind of interesting to see. And I kind of see that's kind of something that is missing a bit, is kind of this sense of like, okay, shall we support each other in this? And it makes sense because we know that where the fight for gender equality has largely been based around the issues that impact women. So there's a lot more sense of solidarity and fellowship around it. And that makes sense. And so I kind of hope to see more, I'd say, more growing awareness of how men in maybe some of these more female-dominated professions can feel a bit more bonded together and be like, we're going to create this space where we support each other a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's hope it will be similar also in the state level or public level or anything. Now I would like to ask our Peter Weissenbacher. Hi, Peter. Were there any interesting questions among the viewers?
Hi, thank you for the word. There were quite a few questions. Most of them were already covered or covered to a large degree. But what was not completely covered, at least, and I would like to raise with Kelly is what were like the successes and the failures in Norway that you could mention and maybe briefly described?
Oh, that's a good, like, just in terms of by like, do you with like any specific projects or kind of like national efforts, or like, is there kind of like, yeah, well, just to make sure I kind of don't speak too broadly, or yeah.
There was nothing specific in the question, but I would probably, from my side, ask you to start maybe a little bit broadly and then go into a specific of, a project or initiative or some legislative change that you know of, that you are familiar with, that may be at least one example of some good practice. Would be practical, would be nice to hear.
Yes, I'm gonna think about it for a second, and I think Ina has a good example that maybe she can kick us off with. So my colleague Ina will maybe begin this this comment, who I think is I'm not from Norway originally, so I think Ina has a much better overview kind of. So maybe Ina, you can kick us off and I'll hop in. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I was thinking I'm just going to like take some of the things that Kelly has already been talking about, which we see as the most like successful initiatives. Like one of them has been, Kelly mentioned, the Men in Health initiative, which is a great way to also get a lot of the people or the men that are recruited to the Men in Health initiative. They are also applying for jobs. So they are applying for jobs and they don't know what to do and they need help to get in the labor market. So they team up with the Men in Health initiative and they get the education to get into that field. But we also have similar like networks. I think that is a really important and successful thing we have had here in Norway, like people networking. We have this other initiative, it's called Girls in Technology, and it's been a success for the girls because we see that a lot of people, they drop out either of the education or from that labor market when it's very gender segregated because they feel as a minority, they don't feel included, they feel more or less alone, and then it's a risk to take those jobs when you're not if I were to go into like Kelly mentioned, like the oil a place out, it would be a risk for me because I would be more or less alone. So like doing these networks, you have role models, you have we work a lot with the schools to try to say that you have to, if you have only 2 male students, you should put them in the same group, don't divide them, because if you divide them, they will feel more alone. But if you put them in the same group where they study together in the same class, they can support each other. And also, as Kelly mentioned, like this, how we get into the higher education. Like, do you get gender points, or do we want to try to recruit more people in there to get like a 30-70% or something like that, which is a current debate. So they're discussing a lot. But it's the paradox because we have we're high up on the equality scale. We have a lot of when it comes to family politics. I know we had one seminar about we have a lot of equality in the home, but we still have a very gender segregated labor market, and that's the paradox. So I think that's why also a lot of people here in Norway are so into trying to figure out. So we're still in like the phase trying out different policies, trying out different projects, and yeah. Sorry, but as you notice, like we have a lot to say about this because it's such a current topic right now.
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Ina. That was a great, and I thought of something as you were saying that, which was great. I think very important what Ina pointed out about specifically with the male nurses students and keeping them in the same study group rather than dividing them. That's one of our kind of main findings from our project Share the Care, that don't like, if there's 50 students and 5 of them are men, don't divide the 5 men between 5 study groups, put them all in one study group, or maybe put 2 of them in one study group and 3 of them in the other. But I think something that has been shown in Norway that I think that could be done better, and this is especially relevant for daycare and nursing, that the men who find themselves, so for example with nursing, a lot of male nursing students are actually quite older, or like they're not 18 or 19, they're kind of coming back after doing a career, or they might have started something. And a part of it is that because maybe they themselves have had a child and they've learned through that experience that they actually really like caring for somebody, or that they really find a lot of joy in that. Kind of the same thing with daycare, or they've been injured and they're in the hospital and they see how amazing nurses are. And I think something that could be better in Norway is more exposure and more opportunities for middle school and high school students to try out working in a daycare. Like I think a lot of male high school students would really benefit from having the chance to work with young people and see how amazing that is. And there was for a while a program, and Nina, maybe you can help me with this. I can't remember what exactly happened. There was kind of some efforts for this to try and put male students in daycares to kind of experience that. And then it was seen as against the law. It was like gender discriminatory because it gave more preference for men to kind of have that opportunity than women. And I think this was kind of a bummer because I think it was a really popular program. And I just speak myself from my own experience where like I worked with like an after school club. Like I had a job opportunity for that when I was in high school. And I learned that I loved working with students. It was such an amazing experience. And from that, I learned I want to be a teacher. And otherwise, maybe I wouldn't have gone into something like that. So I think it really shows the power of giving students more of those opportunities when they're younger. Because a lot of guys might think, I'm not good at caring. What would I do with students? But then all of a sudden they're put in a classroom and they love it. They really thrive. So.
Yeah, I see. It's interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. There is just one question from the viewers, which content was not covered, and that is connected to the trade unions. And the question is basically, what is the role of trade unions? What is the position of trade unions in Norway? And if you think or feel, you know, they could be doing something more, something else, or do what they do in different ways.
That's a great question. I'm not sure if it's been kind of just talked about in the past, but Norway has a quite high trade union membership. It's a very important like part of the Norwegian welfare society and worker rights and labor rights. There's a very big union movement here. And I think absolutely unions can play a bigger role here. I know mainly about the nurses union, that they have been part of the effort in Norway to kind of try and recruit more men to nursing, but they haven't been that involved. Like I know, for example, in our project that we had with Share the Care, where we're working with Iceland. In Iceland, the male nurses, I mean, admittedly, it's a much smaller country, so it's a bit easier for them to do this, but all the male nurses who are in the male nursing union have like a monthly meetup with male nursing students. So there's kind of this like mentoring system established between the nurses union, between male nurses in Iceland with the students. So I think that something similar could happen in Norway. I think that would be quite good. I know it's something that we're kind of working on to better lobby the Norwegian nurses union to kind of be more actively engaged in that. And I know that there's kind of some momentum, but I think that could be improved. So I think that's a really good angle, is where do trade unions fit into this? Definitely.
Okay. So thank you, Peter, for the questions. I think we have to finish our discussion at this moment. So for me, I would like to thank you very much, Kelly, for your participants in today's event. This was our last discussion within the project Strengthening Bilateral Relations. Discussing in the previous weeks, and also for the whole Human Rights Institute. I would like to thank Reform for the deep knowledge they delivered us, or you delivered us, all of you delivered us. And thank you as well the viewers and followers for their interest and participants. And I hope we can meet like this one day in the future again, maybe someday. So it was a really great pleasure to me to join all of you guys. So for me, have a nice evening and see you one day, as I've said. Peter, would you like to say anything, you as a director of Human Rights Institute?
I agree with what you said. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Reform team. Thanks to go to our team here, and obviously thanks go also to our viewers and participants who sent the questions. And good evening if you are watching it live, and nice day or good morning or whatever if you are watching the recording. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye. And we are already looking into opportunities to work with Reform more, because we think this is very important and interesting for Slovakia. Thank you. Goodbye.